up a dive. Feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's so I remember right. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the attic, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member ride. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the Untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
Hey Untold Radio Network fans, want exclusive perks and to support our channel? Introducing our YouTube membership program with 3 amazing levels. Get loyalty badges that level up to different cryptids the longer you're a supporter. How cool is that? You'll also get access to custom Bigfoot emojis and priority in chat. Upgrade to Backstage Pass for exclusive wallpapers, photos, status updates, discounted books, and merchandise. Go all in with the producer level for everything mentioned plus member shoutouts. Ready for an enhanced experience? Join now, pick your membership level, and let's make this journey even more exciting together.
The paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your host, Dr. Dean Bertram.
Hello, my fellow weirdos and weirdettes. Welcome to Talking Weird on the Untold Radio Network. I'm your host, Dean Bertram, and as always, I'm delighted that you've joined me for the next hour or so, whether it's live on Tuesday nights at 9 p.m. Central, where we go out on X and on Facebook and, of course, YouTube, whether you're watching it on one of those platforms where it's archived, or if after the show, after the live show anyway, you found us somewhere on one of the many audio platforms or wherever you podcast. Greetings and thank you for being with me. I had a very busy weekend. Both Midwest Weird Fest and A Night of Horror International Film Festival now run simultaneously in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, in a cinema there, which is a twinplex. So there's always one festival playing on one screen and the other festival playing on the other. And I run both of those festivals, and we get dozens and dozens of filmmakers who come in, not to mention hundreds of audience members. And it's one heck of a fun and hectic now 4 days in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. If you didn't make it this year, think about coming next year. It's always the first or sometimes kind of the second weekend in March if the first weekend isn't a full weekend. And if you came this year, as I know some listeners and some viewers of the show did, thank you. It was wonderful to see you there, and I hope you enjoyed yourself. It seems like everybody did. I'm really excited tonight. We've got somebody back on the show who hasn't been with us for some time. I'm not sure if he's done a show on the network maybe in the early days of the network we had him on. I know before the network he was on when Talking Weird was just an independent show elsewhere. He's a paranormal investigator, a paranormal sketch artist, and content creator with extensive experience in the world of the unexplained. As the former producer for YouTube channel Beyond Explanation and Phantoms and Monsters Radio, he's created and overseen shows covering topics such as Bigfoot, UFOs, and conspiracy theories. So he's going to be right at home with us here tonight. He hosted the show V, diving into some of the most mysterious and controversial subjects in the paranormal realm. And with a unique blend of investigative skills and artistic talent, he brings the unknown to life through detailed sketches and in-depth research, offering a fresh perspective on the strange, the eerie, and the supernatural. So I'm so happy to have back with me tonight on Talking Weird, Vincent Richardson. Greetings,
It's
Vincent.
nice to be back, Dean. It's good to see you.
Man, it's great to have you back. I can see people already in the chat who seem to be looking forward to you being here. Pakwaji Whisperer, Susie, Ken
always
Rock, greetings to see you. Samantha Krause, my lovely girlfriend. Other people are listening in who may very well be your friends. Flat Rockland's here. And Susie's giving me a hard time saying it's about time that I got you on. Well, I have had him on the show a couple times before, just not recently, Susie.
Yeah, and I'm always hanging out in the chat room. So, I mean, it's nice to be on this on the other side.
It's great to have you back on this side of I guess the message wall. Because we haven't had you on for a little while, maybe before we go down the kind of UFOs and human consciousness, which is a great idea for the show you wanted to talk about tonight. I'm so happy we're hitting that. Maybe you could let people know about some of the things that got you into the paranormal, because some of our modern audience might never have listened to you here before.
Sure. Yeah. I grew up in a haunted house. So now a lot of eye-opening things happen there. And actually, when I used to shoot the show at my house there, people would often write in and say they saw weird stuff or heard weird stuff in the
Wow.
audio. I had a near-death experience when I was a freshman in high school. That kind of changed everything from a spiritual and metaphysical aspect, and that kind of threw me into the paranormal world. And I didn't really get back into it as an enthusiast or an investigator until about 2009, when I started doing mostly ghost stuff, house visits for friends and local clients, and that's how it started.
Huh. Maybe that's a good segue into UFOs, because we're talking about human consciousness tonight. So just as before we step off into there, do you think if there is an engagement, and we'll get there, between us and whatever the UFO phenomenon, or perhaps phenomena, because it might be many things, do you think there's a similar engagement going on with some of the things you were talking about then, like hauntings and ghosts and the types of experiences people have in when they approach death?
Sure. I mean, it seems to be all connected somehow. As far as having these experiences opening up to other experiences, it happens with UFOs a lot. People see something that they can't explain, and then all of a sudden they're having poltergeist activity, and then it escalates from there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes often witnesses who have one strange experience have many others, and that's something that some of the early people in the space who were probably looked at things slightly more esoterically, John Keel notably, for
Yeah.
example, even Raymond Palmer, who people probably are aware of. I'm making a documentary about at the moment, Gray Barker. Even a lot of people were conscious of this overlap. But how do you think you approach it then? Let's just jump into the whole UFOs and interconnection with human consciousness. Again, that was your suggestion for a show. Where would you like to start talking about that? What started to make you realize there was this connection between the two things?
Sure. It's studying things like John Keel. You start to see this paranormal everything. But I had noticed through doing my own research that a lot of UFO sightings, like I said, they lead to other paranormal experiences down the road. What that is exactly, I'm not sure. Um, Hynek actually, back when of the Project Blue Book fame, he was thrown into this whole deal. He was a very skeptical man, and he was left to make this whole system with the encounters of that type. You know, CE1 through CE4, and CE1 is visual sightings, no physical evidence or interaction, and there's a lot of cases where people, they see things and they just shrug it off because your scientific brain wants to say that things like that can exist, so they don't. But what was going on in New Jersey recently? There's a plethora of different things, I think,
I
personally.
think you're right.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it becomes difficult because of the noise when, as you're talking about, people see something in the skies. How much of that interpretation of their own do they bring to that? If they see a strange light in the skies, and at that point in time, the headlines are filled with flying saucer stories, then are they likely to think they saw a flying saucer? As in today, if the headlines are filled with mystery drones, if somebody sees a strange light in the sky, are they immediately going to place that within the context of a mystery drone?
Right. Right. And jumping to back to the C E1 and CE2, the four of them. I'll go over it real quick for people that might not know. The
Please do.
CE1 is just a physical sighting, nothing else. A CE2 occurs when a UFO is accompanied by some sort of physical evidence, like scorch marks on the ground, damage to objects, interference with electronics. CE3 is referred to when people make contact with an extraterrestrial or UFO occupant. Um, we've all heard these outrageous stories of people, what they say, or they see aliens or whatnot, but and the CE4 would be the abductions. But recently, there's someone, Dr. Stephen Greer, added to that list, and it's a CE5, which is of the understanding that you can interact with these UFOs through light, sound, and thought. And
That you can initiate the close encounter.
you can initiate and have experiences through light, sound, and thought, which is the idea of the whole thing.
I've always found it interesting that the type of CE5 protocols, and I'm no expert on it, but how close some of them resemble earlier practices of contacting non-human, perhaps spiritual rather than extraterrestrial beings, like the idea of meditation being a part of it, communicating in um, flashes of light now might be the format in C5, but before it might have been knocks on the table, if it was in a spirit room in a seance or something. The
Absolutely.
protocols don't sound that new, they just seem technologized.
Right, right. I mean, the John John Dee was doing it for Elizabeth I, and
Great point.
Crowley, and his whole Lamb experience. What exactly are we dealing with? Is it something extraterrestrial, or is it something interdimensional? Is it spiritual, or is it something off world?
And because I think, as you made clear in the message you sent me today, the interaction with human consciousness also suggests how much of it is us. Like in the essay by Greg Bishop in the late Robbie Graham's um, wonderful collection of essays from various thinkers in this space called UFOs Reframing the Debate, the great Greg Bishop suggests something not that dissimilar to ideas that people like John Keel and Jacques Vallée were playing with, that there might be a co-creation element to this phenomenon. In other words, we might be bringing something to the table in how we experience and how we evaluate, and even how this appearance or even how this phenomenon appears and manifests to us.
It's like we're interfacing with some sort of consciousness.
No, I totally agree. I think that, and I think maybe that might be where as much, if not more, of the answer lies. If there is an answer to be found, it might lie as much with ourselves as it does with the other that we seem to be connecting with or having experiences with. If somebody's a paranormal investigator, and you have a long history in looking into this kind of stuff. How do you think you vet that stuff out, or how maybe vetting it's out? It's the wrong term because it seems to suggest that that's the abnormality and needs to not be looked at. But how do we approach that human side of it? How do we approach our own consciousness and how it interacts?
See, that is tricky because I mean, a lot of this mirrors mental illness, and I have found a lot of time that a lot of these experiencers and a ton of investigators, they start out legitimate, you know, trying their best to explain these things that are going on, but then it turns into something else where it's kind of this delusional, self-fed into not real situation.
And I think that's part of the problem too. For me, at least, it becomes a modern problem. And when I say that, I mean a problem of modernity, a problem of how do we tell not how do we tell we've come to make this kind of demarcation line between the real and the unreal and the spiritual and the physical and us and the other, but earlier cultures didn't have this type of problem of having to determine what was physically real and what was spiritually real, because the demarcation lines weren't as firm. And I always think that fairy faith, just because I might be more familiar with that than with some other belief traditions, and other ones are very reflective as well. We could go to some Native American traditions, and there's some other traditions which I think are similar. But the one I'm most familiar with is fairy faith, and the idea that when you encountered whatever these beings were, the fairies, A, you should try not to encounter them. You should do everything you can to avoid them. But B, if you had a fairy type experience, you needed to be very conscious that what you was experiencing wasn't what you thought you were experiencing, that you were inhabiting this in-between space. And they were probably tricking you with fairy glamour. The beautiful fairy might be an old crone. The beautiful fairy castle might be a dank cavern. The gorgeous, sumptuous feast was really a pile of horse manure. Like, these were the things which some of the old, particularly fairy faith, some of the older traditions of dealing with the other understood this to be. It was more complicated, but in a way it didn't demand us to try to make these weird demarcations between real and unreal. It understood the whole phenomenon is what I'm saying was both real and unreal. It was both had a trickster element, and there was a real element. And our senses themselves were incapable of deciphering the two.
Yeah. And did that faith and belief, give those things power? Because once you have a group of people that believe in a certain entity, does it create that entity? Does it give that entity power to exist in our reality? Are we co-creating this reality with some unknown force that is just playing off of our personal desires?
And I think that might be, whether we find the answer there or not, that might be the most valuable type of outlook on the world that we can discover when we look at these things. Because if this is the way that we're interacting with, whether it's UFOs or Bigfoot or fairies or the Virgin Mary or ghosts or whatever, if somehow we're interconnecting with it and somehow it's feeding off us and somehow we're reinterpreting it, if that aspect of our reality is that has that kind of ebbs and flows in it, then what does that say about the reality that we experience like right now? You know, what does that say about our entire reality?
Yeah. I mean, and that leads into a whole lot of other things as far as is what we're being programmed and what outside forces have agendas and the media and society and what is acceptable and not acceptable these days, and they pretty much tell you how to live and what is reality when it is just a jaded perspective based in greed. The but these people have been running the show for a long time, but that's a different conspiracy for a different
Yeah,
day.
that's another show, but I don't think your
Mm.
point is totally unrelated. I think that the way that we see, and you can take partisan news on any side, but there's certainly been a mainstream cultural, and I don't want to get political now, but a reimagining of reality or a reimagining of right and wrong or a reimagining of of culture, which has clearly been driven from the top down. Traditionally, cultures like fairy faith were driven from the bottom up. They were driven from people's experiences. That's why they're folk tales, right? Because it was the folk who were having these experiences or telling these stories, at least about these experiences. And then it became part of the cultural tradition, and that shaped the culture. That was part of the culture. But today, our culture is really driven from the top down. It's driven by record executives, and it's driven by Hollywood executives, and it's driven by media moguls. So, what we're immersed in today and what our values come from today aren't the experiences of the local village or the local county or even the local country and how we're building on our grandfathers or our grandmothers or our forebears stories or the experiences of the man down the street with the fairies. Now the culture that most people consume and the type of new fairy tales that most people subscribe to are being fed literally down through this very sophisticated media apparatus which knows how to make money and knows how to generate buzz and knows how to direct us in a way which is more beneficial for our corporate overlords. It's a new culture. And those people understand the power of culture, but they control the culture. Well, once upon a time, we control the culture. The culture emanated from the folk. Again, folk tales.
Right. And here's a weird little offshoot from the whole media thing. Uh, sure, a lot of aliens in commercials lately, isn't there? This has been going on for a couple years now. Sure, a lot of aliens in commercials lately.
And in TV programming in general. How much does that shape
Right.
our experiences? I'd argue a lot.
Right, that whole soft disclosure. Are they starting to warm up to us a little bit? They give us a little nugget here and there, don't they? Or they
Well,
just
I
don't
think
care?
most of the ways we interpret the other today, particularly particularly the technologized other, in other words, particularly the fairy in their spacesuits, most of that has been, if not engineered, encouraged by mainstream media and by Hollywood and by a string of books and a slew of magazine articles and television show after television show and advertisement after advertisement that people today understand immediately what an alien encounter signifies or what an alien not signifies maybe what an alien encounter is meant to look like as much as somebody who was raised in fairy faith in Ireland 100 or 200 or 400 years ago understood what a fairy encounter might look like. But there are two differences. The people in Ireland understood the fairies were probably lying to you and working their glamour, and you should be very wary of them. And perhaps most importantly of all, they were taught a very fairy faith had a very strict layout of how you could and couldn't deal and how you shouldn't mainly deal. But if you had to deal with the fairies, what you could do to come out of it without,
Yeah, you had
suffering.
guidelines. There were plain rules of engagement for
And there aren't
the
anymore.
people,
They're gone.
and you're like, stay away from it. Yeah, now it's
Grab the camera. What's that over? It's not like
no, it's everybody doing this, looking at their phone. That's all it is.
gosh.
An alien could fly right up to us nowadays, and people wouldn't believe it for a week. They went, "Oh, it's CGI, it's AI, it's CGI, it's ABC." I don't, and they're just steady staring
There's a
at their
new
phone.
glamour today, the glamour of technology and the glamour of if the disclosure comes, it will probably be some special effects company or some, AI system working its magic. We have a related question from I think she's a good friend of both of ours, Susie Bastille, aka the Puckawudgie Whisperer. She says, does Vincent have any experiences with the Fae? Good question, Susie.
Usually on the disc golf course. They try to leave weird things there for me. They're trying to trap me. Besides that, no real encounters. Maybe, actually, now that I think about it, there's some weird stuff that happened at the old house where where we may have seen, or I may have seen. No, we may have seen a fairy-sized humanoid run across the room. I think I've maybe mentioned this on a show before. And yeah.
You haven't, I don't know if you've told me before. Tell me this story.
Uh,
Or if you did, it was a long time ago. So
and the
audience might
weird
have heard.
thing is during one of those deep YouTube dives, we were just watching weird stuff, like just weird videos, slapped this and whatever, those other shows. I came across a video that it was like the spitting image of what I saw, and I was like, no way, there it is. It was just
Tell me
okay.
what it looked like.
All right, so I saw this little fella, and he was pumping his arms back and like he took off, and he had a little pointy hat. I know that sounds so funny. It was like a dark brown, one solid color, pointy hatted looking humanoid taking off. At the
Gosh.
and I think I would take it more serious if it didn't happen at that house. There was just so much weird things that happened at the house where you started to think like, did I really see that? It was super weird over there, Dean. It was super weird over there.
How old were you when you
Daily
experienced that?
occurrences. Well, I mean, okay, so I grew up there from like 6 to 18, and then I moved back when Dad was like 20, when I was like 25 or something. And it was even weirder when I moved back. We used to see this fellow with this bowler hat and this mustache all the time. My mom and dad used to see him too. And lo and behold, later on in life, we were going through the records of the house, and the Van Damme family owned the house before we did. And there he was. There he was, Mr. Von Damme, with his bowler hat and mustache. And my house was like built in, I think, 1900, and it was definitely had a weird bar in the basement. And
Wow.
there may have been some sort of grave in the backyard too, which was child-sized.
Goodness gracious.
He nonchalantly says, "Yeah," and I had this little girl I would play with all the time too. And I'd tell my parents about it. What is he talking about? He's talking about this little girl all the time playing with his toys. I remember one time one of my toys was gone. I was like, I saw her with it. I know she has it. So I told my mom, I'm like, go to her mom, get my toy back. And she was like, we don't know who you're talking about.
And then this is a good question then. If we're talking about the Fae, and we're talking about perhaps even the extraterrestrial, or what people perceive or imagine as an extraterrestrial, phenomenon for the last 80 years or something. But whatever these things are, do you think then the type of things you were interacting, and there might, I mean, you might just have to take a guess because who the devil can know, but do you think those things are fundamentally different than what people are encountering when they have what on the surface today looks like an extraterrestrial experience, or what people used to have that look like a fairy experience? Or do you think there's different phenomena, or do you think this is a similar phenomenon just appearing differently?
Yeah, a lot of these whistleblowers are starting to lean towards a spiritual connection of some sort. Uh,
Agreed.
Weird CIA documents, talking about religion and UFOs in the same breath. What exactly are we dealing with? Crowley and John Dee, they both messed with a book called the Gosha. And the Gosha is the Solomonic keys of these, I think it's 82 demons, that King Solomon sealed away. And they were his personal slave demons or what have you. And this book details, it's in grimoire, of how these rituals to contact these different beings and what these different beings are used for. And I mean, it's weird stuff too, like can find lost objects and can kill your ex-wife's husband. It's like it's very specific like that too. It's like he's really good at mathematics and astrology and could give your neighbor cancer. Whoa, who's conjuring these and why? And they are like these cult groups. We were talking about these big corporations that shove weird stuff down the public's face. They're doing weird stuff. Like they are absolutely dressing up in robes and doing weirdo stuff in the woods. And you know, you don't think that's going on. Well, it is a lot. Like cults are doing it. The government is doing it. It's it's a whole thing, man.
There's certainly a lot. There's been for years now lots and lots of talk about like Super Bowl halftime shows and Olympic Games opening ceremonies being laden with occult symbology. And when you look at them, it's hard to deny that they're not. And the question then becomes, is this just artists and performers and designers trying to be darkly cool? Or is there some kind of
Is it a
through line?
coincidence every time though? I mean,
Right.
it's
It seems
always
weird.
and they're always doing it. And like that Olympic thing, and it has nothing to do with the athletes. It has nothing to do with the performance of the athletes. The Olympics is for those corporations to make money. They go into these towns and ruin the whole city. They set up these huge Olympic things and they get ready for years and then it just ruins the whole city. And they pack up and leave. And I mean, are the athletes getting the money? No. It's these corporations. It's the commercials that you're watching in between the shot put and kayak shooting. It's kayak
If
shooting.
one was
Or
if one
the-
was particularly suspicious, they might note that the Olympic Games were originally a type of sporting contest which glorified pagan gods and was done, for their pleasure or whatever, right? So it seems
yeah, and
strange that
people
there does seem
died.
to be this through line.
It was like blood and ritual sacrifice and drink from this goblet and set this fire. It's- and we're still doing it. I mean, we're still light that fire and
I saw Flat Rockland
drink the
said
blood.
before, "We're performing a ritual at their behest." And one does have to question how much of this, if there is, and again, this is all hypothetical, but if there is, there are forces behind the scenes sometimes in corporate, popular, mainstream culture. Imagine being able to do these performances or these shows or these rituals and have crowds and people engaging and performing along. I mean, whether there's any real reality at the occult world or not, if enough people believe, and if there are certain figures at higher levels in the corporate hierarchy that believe, the motivation to do them still might be very strong, regardless of the genuine spiritual reality. It'd be like the Nazis, right? Regardless of their whacked out, strange, alternative, cosmologies, the potency of having marches with tens of thousands of people going through these almost, neo-pagan ritualistic traditions. There
Right.
you can see the reason that
Oh,
power elites
everything
want to
he
do
did
this.
was totally occult related and on purpose too. He was, I mean, he was definitely trying to do dark, weird stuff, and they're still doing that. We brought their best scientists and we brought their best weirdos, and you're like, come on over here to America and be our scientists and be our best weirdos. And then Jeff Parsons opened up a gate to hell.
It's funny when you look at those it's funny when you see the connections, some of the occultists like Parsons you were talking about then, and Crowley, who you were talking about before,
Can
and
you
how
imagine
you
hanging
see
out with those guys? They like hung out together. And like L. Ron Hubbard, like the three of them just like, what do you talk about? I guess Gosha demons, huh?
it's nutty. And isn't there talk that Crowley, around the time the Loch Ness Monster became a thing again, like in the 20s or something, had a home on the banks of Loch Ness and was doing these weird rituals to some
Jimmy
creature
Page bought
supposedly
it.
in the loch?
Yeah, Jimmy Page bought that house. Yeah, which is crazy. Zeppelin guitar player. Yeah. Um, and they blame him for doing it. Like he I like that story. I like that he possibly conjured up the Loch Ness Monster, and the Loch Ness Monster is a dinosaur ghost.
Or yeah, well, that's one theory. The
It could
dinosaur
be.
ghost
It
theory is
could be.
great, of course, because if you believe in the continuance of energy in life after death and it's still somehow here, then it would make sense that there a dino ghost somewhere. So why not a plesiosaur ghost in
We
Loch Ness?
need
I'm not
more
saying I actually
dinosaur ghosts.
believe that that's what's in there, but it sure is a heck of a theory.
Mokele Mimbe, is that
And
his?
Mekele Mbembe in
Yeah.
Africa, in the Congo.
Yeah. Yeah, that was just a scam, but I like to think that would have been a fun dinosaur ghost too. But a total scam. Those guys scammed us good. They were like, yeah, there's a dinosaur over here. You should bring all your money and supplies and come check it out. And then we were like, oh yeah, okay, we'll go. Yeah.
I think there's been a number of stories like that throughout the history of
We need to
modern. When I
talk
say
about
modern, I mean
hoaxes
from
and
the
stuff too.
19th century or around that period onwards. I think there were lake monster scandals, right, as well in America, where people were like encouraging tourism by pretending they had a lake monster. Or, I mean, clearly the Loch Ness monster, whatever's there or isn't there, much of the origins of that story comes from people doing media hoaxes and trying to one up people who have put them down. And in fact we screened a wonderful documentary at Midwest Weird Fest this last weekend, and I had John McClaverty, the director, on here a few weeks ago, called Loch Ness, They Created a Monster. And regardless of the reality of what's in that loch, the things we believe about what's in that loch have been very much shaped. I'm not even saying intentionally, but they've been shaped by the researchers, and some of them clearly hoaxed, some of them sincere, who promulgated and brought out stories and popularized the idea of whatever was in that loch, what it might have looked like and how it behaved. And our cultural conception of the Loch Ness monster today is very much the result of the researchers and the hoaxers and the people who have been fooling around in the waters of Loch Ness for the last 100 years or so.
Yeah, I mean, you can't blame them though. You got the governor and the treasury person in there in a board meeting, and they're like, we really need money. And they're like, what if what if we tell them we have a dinosaur in the lake? Yeah. And it sells. I mean, and I love small festivals. Okay, I love them. I love Frogman and all of that. I love it. But I mean, at a certain point, like when something weird like that happens, those little towns, like they grab it and they suck it for all it's worth.
Yeah, I was about to say the exact same thing, and I don't know necessarily if some of these people are hoaxing, but the recent popularization of monsters associated with a small town or region in the United States is because people, very rightly so, have seen there's a commercial benefit in having a Mothman festival or a Frogman festival or a UFO Days festival like we have not far from me, where we can, as a community, have fun, but also bring in tourist dollars. And this is something now that there is a paranormal tourist trade. So why not the same way back in the day, a place like Fort Sumner in, New Mexico might have tried to cash in on Billy the Kid, or Lincoln County might have tried to cash on Billy the Kid as well, or Tombstone tried to cash in on, all the Western shenanigans there. If today people are, and let's be honest, there's probably more people in America today interested in the weird than are interested in cowboy towns. So there's been the emergence of towns celebrating their mythological past, or the manifestations, or
The
the
new
creatures, or
folklore.
the UFO experiences. I totally get, and they're fun as well, is the thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What's the
So,
weirdest thing near you where you live?
get
What's your big?
outside, if it gets people outside and doing stuff together, I'm all for it.
What's your
Sorry, I
closest
didn't-
critter or your closest monster to wherever
Oh, we
you
have the
are? Your most
Momo.
popular.
We have the 3-fingered Bigfoot monster that came out of a UFO. That's how cool we are. We've got Momo, the Missouri monster.
I read Lyle Blackburn's book on that. It's great.
It's super awesome. Lyle Blackburn is an awesome guy. Super nice. Very cool show. Very cool band. I mean, it's a fun band.
Lyle's band, what's or is there a Momo band? Did you mean Lyle Blackburn's band, Ghoultown? Or?
Yeah, Blackburn's band, Goldtown.
They are cool. Speaking of Momo, though, there seemed to be this period in the 70s, which includes Momo and Boggy Creek Monster and,
Boggy Creek, yep.
Honey Swamp Monster or whatever it is. And they were all
White
these
Thing.
these were all a little bit weirder than the current Bigfoots. Like they'd have 3 toe prints and they'd have big saucer-shaped. I mean, I'm just amalgamating it all together, right? Like big red saucer-shaped eyes, and they'd be far more intrusive, and they'd be seen with UFOs. And so much of the Bigfoot stuff today doesn't seem to have that super weird 70s thing to it.
Yeah, we need to bring back sci-fi Bigfoot. We need a better Bigfoot
So much
in the
better.
Bigfoot community. I think so. I mean, that triangle over there with all the big feet and the UFOs, it's pretty cool.
We have some questions I should probably throw to. We have Flat Rockland asking, forgive my ignorance, but is it possible to render intention unconsciously? If so, having a huge group of people, meaning society, perform certain acts, rituals without us even knowing, can there be intent? I think that feeds back to this, what we were talking about before, the type of Olympic Games and Super Bowl commercial, Super Bowl halftime shows and things.
Their whole game is intention, permission, initiation. It's those 3 things. Intention. So they are getting our permission by selling these things, by us accepting these things. That is gaining us going, oh, okay, well, maybe it's not for me, but it's okay. That is permission. That is that part of it. Intention, permission, initiation.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think sometimes that might be the case. Susie makes a good point as well. Susie Bastila Puckwatchy Whisperer. She says, I think you could probably manipulate people into focusing energy on something without them consciously having the intent. I don't know, without them having the intent means the people manipulating, maybe. I think sometimes it's done completely unintentionally. An example would be how there are people now who take Lovecraft's writings seriously and the Necronomicon seriously. And, H.P. Lovecraft, I guarantee it wasn't trying to create some alternative weird, cult of the elder gods.
God, what if that was weird or real? I mean, good Lord, no. I don't want to exist in a Lovecraftian world.
Then it becomes a Ghostbusters problem of like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. Would you want to be focusing on Cthulhu instead of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man if our consciousness?
What did you do, Ray?
Yeah, it becomes really, you're right, the city beneath the sea, and then we're all in trouble.
There you go. Yeah, but I think that is a little bit of what's going on. I think we are telling it. I think we're shaping this interaction. I think we're shaping the interaction, and I think it's going to increase because more people are paying attention.
Yeah, I think sometimes there's an intent, sometimes there's not an intent. Susie says something else. I don't know if this was for us or for other people in the chat. I actually have someone in WA, is that Washington? So what it stands for here, Washington, who had a sighting looking for other people in the area who have. That's interesting. I think sometimes people feel more validated if they can find somebody else who has a sighting in the same area. Often we tend to think then that must be a legitimate sighting as opposed to somebody who has had a sighting on their own. If you have other witnesses who can somehow they vindicate your sighting. But if all of this stuff's culturally bound, then maybe it's as valid if one person's seen it or if 100 people have seen it.
Yeah.
If we're all interacting, I guess we just live in a world where more witnesses somehow give something more, validity.
Well, yeah. I mean, even say starting at ghosts and spiritual stuff, seeing that can be mind shattering. I mean, just watching something move on its own accord for the first time is a hell of a thing when you're scientifically minded and you're sane. So I feel when people have these experiences, they really want that connection, somebody to say, yes, I too have been through that, and I too know that that is a real thing. And because you question your sanity, which is a terrible thing.
The interesting thing, of course, is I think it was John Keel who suggested that maybe there are people who are somehow able to see things that the rest of us can't see or are able to attract things that the rest of us can't attract, but somehow being in their presence works like being in an umbrella with somebody else in a rainstorm. Like if you're under that umbrella, you actually somehow are engaging in the same reality. So perhaps who's to say if there isn't an umbrella effect, if that affects throws 6 feet to either side of us, 1 foot to either side of us, or 600 feet to either side of us.
Well, I think vibrationally is how we're experiencing these different things. How our emotions and our experience tunes our vibrational state. I'm not very sure, but I know that when some people who are more psychically inclined, or just you've been around those people that are just vibrationally there, and uh, they have more strange experiences, and you're more likely to have a strange experience with a person that is tuned to that. If you're tuning to their vibration, you're going to share that experience.
Yeah, I think so much of this stuff makes any type of, again, sense within the type of lens of modernity that we're all trained to try to understand reality under some type of science as the arbitrator of this reality and telling us what's possible and what's not possible. But I don't think those ideas should be dismissed because we've had no luck trying to determine what any of this is, whether it's UFOs, whether it's Blessed Virgin Mary sightings, whether it's Bigfoot sightings, whether it's
Mhm.
specters in back hallways of the family estate. None of this stuff are we any closer to deciphering. Of course, the great hope of ufology is the government is about to lay down some story which sounds like a bad plot out of the X-Files, right? The great hope of the Bigfoot community is we'll finally have that indisputable piece of DNA or a Bigfoot body or something. The great hope of the paranormal community is that somehow science will take some EVP recording seriously and start spending more time looking at it. But it's all just nonsense on stilts. None of this is ever going to happen So perhaps perhaps there's no answer for starters, but perhaps at least the way we need to start rethinking these things to try to make some type of sense out of them, or to try to at least to develop some kind of lens where we can look at this stuff more holistically. Those type of ideas which don't sound like they fit with current scientific paradigms is because they don't fit with current scientific paradigms, but current scientific paradigms are doing us no good. So we need to look at these other ways. I think we need to look through these other lenses to try to make some sense of it.
I'm glad you think that, because that's basically what my new show is going to be about in a nutshell. It's going to be different paranormal topics in presentation form. I'm going to try to put all the dots on the board for people and show you how I've connected the dots. Maybe you can connect them a different way, and maybe we'll learn something together.
Oh, wow. When are you planning on dropping or commencing this new show? And tell us a little bit more about it.
Well, I just got the equipment back to running status here, so I'm still working on that aspect of throwing things together. But I've got a lot of things written down already, because I'm supposedly I'm writing a book, but has been going in multiple directions lately. But the idea is to talk about things like UFOs in a broad paint stroke, or ghosts in a broad paint stroke, and then to slowly connect these things and get a little bit deeper.
Man, it sounds fantastic. I do have to say a quick thank you to Anne Joanne, who's become a YouTube member of of Untold Radio Network. Thank you, Anne Joanne, for joining us and being here with us.
Awesome.
We really appreciate it. Do you plan on it being like both a video show and a podcast, or what type? Tell me about the type of formats.
Yeah, so I'm gonna make these presentations, and then I'm going to basically air them live and kind of talk and go through things. And I'm sure I'll have guests on here and there. Me
Oh,
and the
I'm down whenever you want me,
Puckwudgie
man.
Whisperer are talking about yelling about things together soon. She wanted me to tell you that I'm managing her YouTube personality now. Like, if you need her to come on the show, or if you want her to bake you cookies, I could set that up.
Oh, I have to go through you now. Susie's got the agent.
Yeah, I'm her agent now. No, but we might be yelling about stuff in the near future. Yes.
Yeah,
I
Susie
look
says
forward
she's
to
looking forward to
yelling.
yelling.
We are angry about multiple things in the paranormal world. Manager. Yeah.
She confirms you
I'm
are
so
her
good at
man, and you
managing
get
things.
10%.
10 whole percents.
That's
Yeah.
a pretty good deal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's the IE on the Puckwudgie. Mm-hmm.
Just don't be like Charlie Brown in A Boy Named Charlie Brown, where Lucy becomes his manager, and she says so Puckwudgie as Whisperer doesn't actually want to be like this. Susie doesn't want to be, and Lucy gets mad with Charlie Brown when I think he fails the spelling bee or something, and says having 10% of Charlie Brown is like having 10% of nothing.
Oh.
But Susie, you're far more
Football
valuable,
too, man.
and Vince is lucky to have 10% of maybe you know what, maybe when this stuff launches, particularly if Susie's a regular guest, we need to do something with you and Susie back on Talking Weird to talk about the format and how you guys are doing it, everything else.
Sure.
So,
as her
sounds like
manager,
you
I
guys
can
can
say that she's 100% in. Two whole
She's
dollars.
worth at least $2, she says. So that's better than nothing. That's better than Charlie Brown.
That's perfect. But yeah, the shows will, I hope, be coming out in the next couple months. We're starting.
Do you have a title?
And,
is it going to be V again, or is it going to be something else? Or?
I'm still bouncing stuff around. I don't think it'll be V again. I think we're going to see a rebirth, a second coming.
Man, I'm super interested.
Yeah.
Do you ever think you might go out and do videos in the field or anything as well? Is that type of stuff?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm going to be doing some of that. Also, probably going to be checking out different equipment pieces and kind of breaking those down too. Might be doing a little bit of that as well.
Like paranormal type
Yeah,
ghost hunting
like
equipment, things like that.
actually helpful equipment, both old and new. Broad range of divining rods to spirit box. All the in betweens, the good, the bad, the ugly.
Can you
They
tell me
don't
what your
work at all.
favorite pieces of equipment is now as we get ready to roll up the show? What would you recommend? What's one piece of equipment that you would say anybody doing this type of research should have?
A recorder. Just the best thing to do is do burst sessions, EVP burst sessions. That's where you'll find weird stuff.
Like just an audio recorder, you mean?
Yeah, you can use your phone. You don't need one of those special ones that they say, "Ooh, it's got the right hiss." There's a Sony one that everybody goes crazy for. Oh, it's got the right hiss, and you can hear the things. It's either there or it's not.
Do you think sometimes excessive equipment taking it into the field, do you think it ever scares the entities away, or do you think you can go to like? Because I was talking to Ben Goldman, who is the director with Sarah Leinhardt of you can see it on Paraflix now, a wonderful documentary called The Dweller. In fact, he was the guest on last week's Talking Weird, I believe. And I was chatting with him at the festival because we played Dweller at Midwest Weird Fest, and he was talking about how their first encounter, I think, with this being, they weren't recording. And in a way, he regrets that they weren't, but at the same time, he wonders if they would have had the experience that they had if they'd been rolling the video stuff, if they'd been rolling all the EVP recording stuff. Like perhaps sometimes these things manifest when we're not recording.
Yeah, like whatever this consciousness we're dealing with, be it angels, demons, aliens, ultraterrestrials, fae, trickster element, whatever it is, it knows it's in our head. It is interfacing with our thoughts, and I really think that's why we see such a weird spectrum of things in this reality. It's because we're creating it all the time.
I do think we are. I think we are at least co-creating it. And I think that writings by people, for example, like Philip K. Dick's Valis, which was semi-autobiographical, and he also has a book where he talks about this thing that he called Valis or zebra, this plasmate living intelligence that he was somehow interacting with, that it was like a will-o'-the-wisp, that it was, presenting in certain different ways, and that maybe it was giving us some type of code or key or insight to the fact that the reality that we were existing in was a very different reality to what we thought it was. At various times, Philip K. Dick called that reality the Black Iron Prison, or he suggested that the empire had never ended, meaning that we'd been trapped somehow in an historical period of tyranny since Roman times, and over the surface of that just lay these other imprints of what we thought reality was. And whether that's literally true, or whether it's spiritually true, or somehow whether it's just allegorically true, there seems to be some power into that the reality we live in is somehow inherently inhuman and inherently unfriendly to our greatest spiritual needs and desires, and to our comprehension of the mysteries of the universe, that we get stuck in a life where we get up and clean our teeth and go to work in a little car or a little train carriage, and then we sit in a cubicle all day, and then we come home the same way and cook a microwave dinner and binge Netflix and then pass out, and we rinse and repeat and do it all over again.
The
Whatever
modern
this reality is.
samsara.
Sorry, say that again.
I said it's the modern samsara.
It certainly
It
seems to
really
be.
is, though. It really is. And how do you break away from that? You know?
Maybe in some way these other things show us that there's a higher reality. Whatever they are, somehow it shows us that there's something more than that cubicle Netflix life.
That I can get behind.
You and I both. So again, when can we expect to see your show? Is anywhere people should be waiting or watching or looking for it? Or
Right. No, I'm going to throw my email out there. So if you guys want to get a hold of me and if you guys want to tell me about some stuff that you've seen or some ideas you have, or if you just want to say, hey, it's good to see you again. I haven't seen you in a long time. You can contact me at paranormalvincent@gmail.com. And yeah, about 2 months away from my first endeavor, I believe. Mhm. I
well,
hope.
I'm super excited. I will also put your
Will you
email
come
as
on
it
my show
already
then?
is in the show
Hmm?
notes. So people could, if they missed that,
Mhm.
they can go and look at the show notes wherever you're watching or listening to this is. And I'm waiting with bated breath. I'm looking so forward to your show. And maybe once it starts running, like I said, if Susie's going to be a regular guest, we can get the two of you on and have a, or just you again, whatever, Susie again, whatever, and have a little conversation about the direction the show's going and the things you guys are doing. And again, it was just great
Right.
to have you back to get to chat to you again, Vincent.
It's great to be back. And it's always awesome to talk to you, dude.
Well, man, thank you so much. And until I get to talk to you again, Vincent, and until I get to talk to everybody else out there, please keep it weird.